All right, so like you said, I'm just going to go over. We're not on Class 8 yet, and actually are just beginning testing for that. So I'm going to talk about what we did for upgrading from 6 to 7 a couple of years ago, and the same methodology that we're applying to 8. Um, and as a reminder, we're completely on-prem, so what we do might be a little different than what you might need to do if you're hosted or a hybrid or something like that. But I think the principles are applicable everywhere. So software testing, first starting off why it's important. No matter, I'm sure Active tests their software before they send it to us. But they're not going to catch everything. I don't think any software company is going to catch everything with internal QA. So you have to expect that there's going to be bugs and prepare for those. And maybe identify them, like Class 8, I'll talk about in a bit. That's something we found and then heard about later. We'll catch the bugs, be able to be prepared for those. Maybe it's one that's going to be fixed, maybe it's not. I think we've been working with something in Class 7 since we got it with like password length that we just have to deal with. And then they couldn't possibly have tested how your environment is. I'm sure they test that this card printer works with glass or this receipt printer works with glass. But they couldn't test your particular environment all the way, your combination of printers, swipers, everything else. And in something like our case, we use Citrix to deploy glass, which I don't think they even touch with a 10-foot pole, and make that pretty clear. So we have to test that, make sure it works through Citrix, and everything else. And finally, just doing the testing, setting up that test environment ahead of time, makes it so you're ready for live. You make the test environment equal to live, you know what to expect on upgrade night, and in theory it makes your life easier. In practice it may not help, but I think it's a good exercise when it's not in crunch time and you don't have downtime. You're working to test, figure everything out for live, and keep going. So that's why it's important. And I have a good example of why I've been burned, which might be kind of funny, but we added the leak registration module to our license to our database without looking at it really at all. I mean, we installed it in test and kind of went through it, didn't really test it, and it ended up kind of burning us. When we went live with it, as you might know if you have leak registration, an extra tab and checkbox appear in program registration, and since we didn't prepare our users to let them know that would happen, they kind of went crazy. And started calling us for no apparent reason. It doesn't really affect your ability to use program registration. But they saw something they weren't prepared with or weren't familiar with. The other thing is these checkboxes, something got unchecked, so you're only searching teams or something. So they couldn't even find people. But anyway, it generated hundreds of calls to our help desk that we could have avoided if we had just checked it out, done our due diligence, and let them know ahead of time. Even though we can't do anything about that, we can prepare them as best we can and maybe cut that call total by 75%, by half. And just it would have helped us, would have helped the agency, would have saved a lot of trouble. So here's a funny little diagram of our setup for class. Everything's on-prem. So it's important that we test everything beforehand, payment server, all the services, all the different servers, probably about 10 servers that manage our whole class system. And if something goes wrong with any of those, it's on us. It's our butts on the line. We're the ones staying up all night, upgrade night, staying there the whole week while we figure out what's going on. So that's why I want to test stuff, because it's my butt on the line. It's Len's butt on the line. So he makes me do it. But I don't want to stay up all night and then the next night and the night after that. So. All right, so for our testing methodology, we decided we were going to make a test in Excel with a bunch of different steps and results, and then run through it a bunch of times. So here's an example of a section of the test we made for 7 that in Excel basically tells the test taker to do something, what they should see, and then they can note whether it's a pass or fail, and if something goes wrong, they can note it. So we figured that would allow us to repeat the test many times over and over and over again, and make sure we're getting the same test over and over again without any differences, and let someone know that might not necessarily be the best class user. They don't have to be an expert in order to know what should happen because we told them. And then we can tally up what's going wrong and look at it later after we're all said and done. We wanted to go a little one step further, so we decided we wanted to do randomized data. So I made a randomizer in Excel. Basically, drew up a few simple queries to go into our test database and grab the data, scrubbed it a bit, like updated passwords all be the same, so we don't have to worry about that. Put it in Excel and then use Excel functions to pull a random value out of that giant list of like 1,000 records. And you just click the randomize button and it would just keep going. So every time you needed to put or use a piece of data, like pulling up a course, registering a client, you didn't have to go looking for it, didn't have to make it up. It was all there in the Excel spreadsheet and it was told to you.
And this was inspired by our visit to Toronto. Toronto is a huge city, and they do 1.5 million. There's 1.5 million citizens, and they do tons of registrations. On their peak registration days, on our peak registration days, we're hitting 8,000, 9,000 registrants. They're hitting that number in the first 5 minutes, right? And so there's other ones that can scale up to that. But one thing that they did when I went on their site was they load tested their hardware, their eConnect servers, and their Class GUI with some other software that I couldn't afford. But what it did was they would go in, they would dump data from the database and scrub out some of the the passwords, and they could push a button and it would replicate the steps to test how things were going to work and how to do the server. So this was our cheap way of doing that. But what it does do by putting this random data in is it serves that each test. When we first built this test and gave it to staff or our help desk to run, it was always with the same data, right? And so what turned up a lot more mistakes and got our eyes on things faster was getting a kid to register, getting an adult to register, getting all these different variations, different programs. So this was my best effort at trying to, replicate this, really expensive software that they got from Oracle.
So our load testing consisted of 10 on the scale of 10 to 20, but same idea. And like a big one was like payment type, making sure you hit up all the different payment types. And we ended up finding a bug with like checks in Class 7 that was fixed with a hotfix later. But if we had not done randomized data and just went straight cash or maybe credit cards, we wouldn't have found that, and you might as well not test at that point. So with the Excel sheet, we wanted to test, or my methodology for building that test was to kind of look at the different day-to-day operations that different user groups were doing. So you hit up all the important ones and take care of those and make sure they can do their job after we upgrade. If there's some obscure bug with a random crystal report or something like that, we'll deal with that after the fact. But if someone can't scan in a membership or process a registration after we upgrade, that's a big problem and one we didn't want to deal with. So here we have 5 different user groups, base user groups: cashier, CSR, MOD, manager on duty, facility manager, and then help desk, and then just split up different tasks between those within the test. So the test had 5 sections that we went through and different users for all that. So once we had the test, we had a bunch of different layers we needed to actually test. I mentioned Citrix before. So we had to test, we use Citrix to deploy to our field, but there are computers that still have a local installation of Class. For instance, our help desk computers, my laptop, so like a gate kicker over at Fairland. So we need to make sure the real installation of Class works as well. So we first tested that the local installation of Class worked and ran through that test. After that was done, we were satisfied, addressed the issues. Then we moved on to Citrix and tested, built a Citrix box, and then installed that and tested that. Once we were all good with Citrix and satisfied with those results, we tested some new hardware. We had a new card printer, receipt printer we wanted to see if we could get to work through Citrix is the important part. Like Epson thermal printer, we actually weren't able to do until a year or two after going to 7. I think that was a Citrix limitation, but we just wanted to see if we could make it work, and this was the time to do it. And then after that, we added another layer just because we realized we needed to test eConnect and IVR and make sure that worked the same. So we went through all those, and at each layer, we tallied up the results. Here's an example for the layer 1. So we did the test 10 times with a bunch of different users. We got some people from the field to come in and take the test. And we tallied up all the results. Mostly good. You can see yellow here where there was partial fails. So that links back to like the payment problem that we had with checks. It only happened when you pulled checks on the randomizer. So that's why it only failed some of the time. This is still going on with us. Infamous the user status set to none thing with user records in use. We found a new feature here with class 7 was that before 7, when you swiped the credit card, it didn't close that window automatically. I guess for PCI compliance with 7, once you did, it closed automatically so you couldn't read the card number off the screen. So we found that out, and some other stuff. So after we addressed those issues, figure out if we could do something about them, or if we couldn't, we moved on to layer 2. Here's an example for layer 2. We had a bunch of different Citrix servers that we needed to test separately, so we ran less tests per Citrix server. So here's just for one of them. We had complete fails. For the pass validation one in this case was sounds not working over Citrix, the membership pass scanning sound, like the ding, and I don't even know what they are because I've never heard them. Those don't work through Citrix, so we just don't have the scanning sounds. And then for the maintenance one was maintenance one was just found out the Crystal reports weren't working, and it turns out they installed Crystal reports wrong on the Citrix server. So figure out the right, or make sure they did it, or the IT. So we weren't the ones that set up Citrix servers. It's our corporate IT. Make sure they did it correctly, and then we were on our way for the future. So we kind of did that for each layer, and by the end, we were relatively confident that we were ready to upgrade. We knew what to fix, what to do right on upgrade night, what to install. And then we upgraded, and great example of why testing can't catch everything. Our daily cache balance went wrong for some reason. It didn't happen in test, but we spent the next week trying to figure out why our VCB report wasn't working, and I ended up hacking the daily GL to do the same thing, and that's what we've been doing ever since. So, but we saved ourselves a lot of other headache and went from there. Now, as we're getting ready for Class 8 upgrade, we're going to apply the same testing methodology to Class 8. So we're going to do the Excel with the randomized data, test the new features as well, but the same things with the stuff we do every day, the same everyday tasks, everything else. And and we caught something, which was kind of funny. Someone mentioned that when you update something on a customer account, it updates all accounts. Well, Patrick went in and updated an email address just to see what would happen.
During our Class 8 testing.
During our Class 8 testing, yeah. And it updated everyone. We're like, well, what's going on? So we called our DBA. Yeah, that's weird. Did someone do a query or something? Called our DBA, and they were convinced that Patrick had run some update query on the entire database, or that something had happened. And then the very next day or something, the bulletin came out from Active that it was a bug and that it was a hotfix. So catch things like that for testing and go on from there. So that's why it's important. I don't know what everyone else does for testing if you test, but I just wanted to show how we did it with the Excel spreadsheet and the randomized data, and just tried to make it a repeatable process that you can do over for multiple different tests, multiple different users, randomized data to try and replicate some semblance of load testing and catch everything else. So, anyone have any questions?
I got an observation.
Yeah.
At the other end of the spectrum, there are sites upgrade without ever even walking in. And my favorite one we ever got, we got a call, big panic, he just upgraded, I think it was class 4 or 5, somewhere like that. And there's a big problem. Password is displaying on the screen after you've logged in. And we have our support guys going, they can't replicate it. Where is it showing? Right in program reg, my password showing the bill program registration. Finally figured out, is a version we simplify course groups. You can set up a course so you can take more than one spot. So we put the proper spots right on the registration screen. His password was spots. So, and not in class, I just look, see what it says now. Class 8 it says spots required, but I guess in that version, just spots in front of the spot. And so go back to copy passwords on this. So everyone's passwords, I was just showing yours.
All right, so I think Jody was going to talk about their specific experiences with upgrading the Class 8 since they have done it. Jody.
Take it away, Jim.
You will not have the horrific experience we had. We were the guinea pigs. You will have a much better experience than we did. Got the data trainer base in, started testing, got the reports back. We sent in all our customized reports. They came back. They all worked in Trainer, every last one of them. I tested every report. Had a few of my power users registering and looking at different things. Scott even did an initial trainer base online just to look at what was there. It was okay till we went to live. None of our reports worked in live. Because we had to send them back, it took so long, we couldn't have Matthew LaRoe work with us. So we got a new guy. Didn't know him, never worked with him, told me he'd been with class for 6 weeks. I panicked. Kept assuring us that he knew what he was doing. Well, unfortunately, he didn't know what he was doing. Very nice young man, just couldn't speak English and didn't know what he was doing. That's okay. Finally got through to someone up a little bit higher on the scale, and they got our reports back to us. Reports are working. Class 8 does have some nice features in it. You're not going to have any of those problems. Everything you do is going to be well organized. If there's I would suggest that if you know a specific person that you work well with that is still working on the class portion of it, request them and see if they're still available. Work with somebody that's familiar and knows the way your company works. Yesterday, Shannon was showing you that you can email your barcode and your password to them, which is a really neat feature. The other nice feature is online on eConnect, you can reprint any class receipt that is in the system. So if you need a receipt from last year and you need it for tax purposes, whatever, you can go in there and print it. It's there. It's on my account. I test so many things, I can go in and print off 20 receipts right now. That's a nice feature. Reports can be sorted alphabetically now. You don't have to go by the ID number. Now I haven't used this, but you can specify which reports are public to all your users and which reports are restricted. I don't have any that should be restricted, so I'm not too worried about that. I do like the location group that's added. It gives you another filter so that you can filter down. The other feature that is supposed to work, which I haven't used yet, is that if we have a trip, that's a big trip, say they're going on a cruise, it has 4 different price points, single, double, triple, quad. You are able to do that. Somebody has told me that it does work on eConnect, so they can go in and do that. Or if you have a resident, non-resident cost, those 2 are on there, and you choose whichever. It's chosen according to what you're listed as, whether you're a resident or not, but you do have that option. Other than that, 8 I like. I've not had any problems with it since the initial sign in. If you want to look at it, got my computer here. We just don't, we went to 8 to give us more time to make a decision as to what we're doing. And that gave us, like an extra year to make our decision, and that year's almost up, so. But if you have any questions specifically that you need to do, that you want to look at, just come back and look at my computer. I've got it with me.
I have a question real quick.
Sure.
Did you ever hear an explanation from class on what went wrong with the reports moving to lab? No.
No, I said, okay, why are they working in Turner and they're not working live? Nobody gave me an explanation. Deirdre is the one who sent them back to me, I believe. And
So you said put them in, they should work now.
they should work now. Yes, sir.
When you said they did work, did you just get the error box and nothing else, or did they actually?
Yeah, it just didn't work. No error box, no nothing. You just couldn't get a report. It just kind of sat there and did nothing.
Do you suggest using their consultant, or can you get through this? without-
No, you'll need the consultant.
for what-
It wasn't, the difficulty we had was that by the time the reports were ready for us to put into live, Matthew wasn't available. We didn't know this fellow. He didn't know class very well. I'm not sure why. And that's what caused the problem. There was a slight language barrier as well, and I wish I could remember his name. I know I've got it in my emails. I would use a consultant. It's not something you can do. This fella, the one big problem with him is I kept saying, okay, let's update the host payment server, and he kept saying, I know what I'm doing, but he didn't say yes or no. And then he said goodbye, and our database and our eConnect and my boss and me are sitting there going, did he just hang up on us? Well, of course, immediately, we couldn't take payments.
You're not convincing me that I need a consultant.
We didn't know this fella, and
Yeah.
he was pitching in because it was short notice and we'd already upgraded and we needed somebody. I don't know him. I haven't spoken to him since. I'm sure he has honed his skills a lot better. That's why I say if there's a consultant that you have worked with that you really work well with, see if he's still working on the class portion still and request that person. You may have to wait a couple weeks. You might have to wait a month. We would have had, Matthew was so booked up, we would have had to wait 2 more months. And I said, no, let's get this done. I'm sure whoever they've got is good. I don't know what this fella's doing now. But we got it sorted out and it works. So you guys will have a much better experience than we did. And it was just like a comedy of errors. You had to laugh. Otherwise you're going to sit there and moan and groan and cry all the time. But Class 8 works very well. I'm
Are
very.
you hosted in server?
We are hosted payment server. We did that for PCI compliance. We did that. We went 2 years ago with hosted when we were still on 7, and so we were hosting ourselves. And Elevon was our merchant, and they had such a lackadaisical way about it. Well, you give us a $25 fine every month for not being PCI compliant. I went, 2015 is coming too quick. No, we're going to go host it. At least that's covered, and it works well. We have very few problems. The updates and everything we need for that are pretty much added in. It was just the upgrade to 8 that we had to have assistance with. So. But if you want to, it'll give you time. If you don't want to, and you want to go straight to active or whatever your company decides to go with, that's up to you. But 8 works very well. I'm pleased with it.
We just had issues with the reports as far as sending them to the upgrades team. They would send them, we said, okay, we'll send our reports. We'd never hear back from them.
Yeah, it took a long time.
Did you receive your report? No, we didn't get anything. Okay. We'd send them again, say, okay, we're sending them right now. Never heard anything back from them. So it's one of those, don't trust that when you send it to where they say to send it, that it got there.
They got them. They just
No, ours never got them.
yeah, they got ours. We were originally going to go in January, and they weren't ready to do the upgrades then. And it got postponed till middle of February.
Yeah.
And then it got postponed again to the middle of April because the reports didn't work in live.
Yeah.
You know, so they worked in Trainer. I don't know if there's some magic button in there that they just pushed or one little dot that they forgot. But they didn't work in live, and it just didn't make any sense to me, and nobody could explain it to me, or they didn't want to take the time because I'm not a techie, so I know the software. That's it. You know how to make things function in class. So you won't have those problems. That's all taken care of. So
Yeah, not
good
really.
luck.
Thanks, Jody. Thank you, Jody.
Yeah.